Welcome back to Tink Bing. Check it out. I'm Tink, she's Bing, and we're checking out RC cars. I've been running this MN128 Jeep for a couple weeks now and been really enjoying this car. It's a great value if you're looking for something that is really cool looking. A lot of detail on the interior in there. The doors open up, close. The hood opens up and closes on this. Very cool Jeep. Here is the chassis. Now, you can see here's your motor with the heat sink on it. I took this apart because I was taking the shocks off to try to lighten up the spring tension in the shocks. And one of the springs that goes right up in here popped out when I was trying to screw it in, and it got lodged right down in here behind the motor sink, and I could not find it. So I finally had to take my car apart to find it, and finally after 10 minutes of looking around for it, I finally found it lodged right up in there. So I got my screw back, but I wanted to show everybody what I'm doing with my shock absorbers here. These are pretty easy to pop apart once you take them off of the vehicle. There's just a little slot in that allows you to take it off the shaft there. Just push it up off the bottom piece and slide it off through that slot right there. And that will allow you to just take the spring off. And then there is also this piece right here. And this piece was right up on the top of the shock right there. And then the spring is there. And I understand it makes this a little bit larger diameter, and the spring seats up against it a little bit nicer than it does if you take that off. But I've taken mine off, and I think I'm going to leave it off for now until I replace these shocks, because the spring tension is just too tight with this on there. And if I take that off, it takes out that much pushing on the shock, tightening it up, so it allows the shock to run just slightly looser. So if you want to take those off, that just slides right off. You put your spring right back onto the shock, pull it back, put this piece right back onto the shaft, and it will seat right back onto the bottom. And now my shock doesn't have as much tension. So when I'm rolling over those bumps and such, it should have a little bit easier actuation of the shocks as it moves over the bumps. It shouldn't have quite as much resistance in the shocks, which will be nice because they were just too stiff out of the factory settings. So I will screw these back on, and we'll have those replaced with a softer spring tension next. So while I had this apart, I figured I might as well show everybody what's inside of it. Here is your electronics board, and there you go. You take the light. So here's your electronics board, and this is where your lights sets plug in right here. So the lights on the bottom of the Jeep are really nice. They're all tucked in. They're really well wired. So this light, just red on the outside on the wires, that just plugs right in there. So if you're taking your Jeep apart to work on it, it's easiest just to unplug the light so you can set the body aside. So I have taken clear fingernail polish and coated this. I popped it out. There's just a little plastic peg here and here where there's a hole in the board, so you can just slide it down in there and it'll just clip on. So you just pinch those and pull this whole circuit board out. I did the fingernail polish on the other side as well to waterproof it so I can go in the water now. I also put a little bit of fingernail polish on this little circuit board piece on the back of the motor there, and I also did it on the circuit board underneath the body that controls the lights. And there's a little screw right in the middle of that board. I just unscrewed that screw and the whole thing popped out, and I was able to put some clear fingernail polish on the other side of it as well. So far I've run it through the water a few times and I haven't had any issues with it other than getting some water in my tires, which is fairly normal. These wheels do have a vent hole in them, so the water will just go right through the rim and into your tires. This car does come with foams. I haven't put the foams in my tires yet, it doesn't seem to need them. The tires are a little stiffer than I would like already, so I don't think they're tires for it. But I took all this apart to get the water out and to dry them out. These wheels are plastic. They're cool looking, but they are just a plastic wheel, and the tires were not glued onto them, so I was able to just pull the wheel right off and drain the water out and clean them out on the inside. So if I just pop that back on there, they seem to hold on good enough when you're climbing the hills and stuff. It doesn't seem like the rim is spinning inside the tire, so I'm not going to glue them on at this point. So I just wanted to give everybody a really good look at this car without the body on it. There's your motor and your heat sink. Here's your transmission, your drive shaft, your main transmission for the separate drive shafts that go on the bottom. Now, this suspension is a little bit limited. The travel is a little bit limited by the shocks. The shocks, they say they are 68 millimeters hole to hole, but they seem like they are a little closer to 65 millimeters, if you ask me, by measuring them. I'm looking to get maybe a replacement set. I was thinking about getting some that are 90 millimeters, but after looking at the car without any shocks on it and measuring where this will travel up to, a 90 millimeter shock, you're going to be wasting about a centimeter of the travel anyway. So 80 millimeters is going to be about as much as you're going to want to go on the amount on your shock for the length on your shocks. So anywhere from 65 to 80 millimeters should be a good travel for your shocks. So a couple things I wanted to point out on this car here. I think this is working with the suspension. It does seem like it's a little softer now. I've got my tires back on. I've got all my shocks put back on the car, and everything seems like it's working pretty well now. So I can set it down and it's just gonna, all the wheels go right back down to the ground, even with one up on something, which is nice. It seems to be a little softer. I hope that's gonna work a little bit better. I wanted to point out, here are your main rails for your construction of the vehicle here. And I wanted to point out, these are C-channel metal rails. So these are good, strong. This is not a flimsy car. This has got really good stiffness to it, and I think it's going to be pretty good. You can see there's a little bit of metal exposed on the drive line there. I took some WD-40 and I sprayed it in there after I cleaned it out really good and blasted it out with the air hose, just to try to keep the water from rusting any of those parts out or anything like that. But I ran it through the water a couple times, cleaned it out really well, and everything seems to be good to go. Really seems to be running nicely still. Here's this controller that I was a little taken back with at first. This thumb lever I really like a lot. This protrusion here that allows you to use your thumb without having to go up to the foam. It just gives you a little easier reach. Now this controller has an on-off switch here, and then it has up top, this is your steering trim, and then you have a button for your speed control. So this is going to control your high or low speed. And then the turn signals go into flash mode, and they no longer work as turn signals, but they do work as flashers the entire time you're driving. So if the turn signals annoy you when you're driving, then you can turn them into flash mode, and they will just be like your hazard flashlights on your car. Now these two little bumps right here on the controller don't do anything. And up here next to your speed trim, you have an ESP with all your little numbers around it, and you'll notice that there is no knob coming out of the ESP knob because it has ESP. It already knows what you want, I guess. So there's your controller. It's been working really well for me. So far, I like this car a lot. If you're looking for a car that's not necessarily 10th scale, because this is 1/12 scale, and it may be a little bit small on the 1/12 scale side, this is a really good value. I found this on AliExpress, and I got this for under $100 shipped to my house. And so far, everything's running great. I'll get it all put back together for you, and we'll get some more videos with this spring at a lighter setting on these shocks, and we'll see if this helps the suspension be a little more active when we're out on the trail running. Thanks for watching. Take Bing out.